Hey everyone, Professor Snart just checking in here. I have gone through all of the essays that people had submitted for Unit 7, which was essay number 1, our first essay for the course. So you can check the grade, obviously, but also what I've done, as in the past, I've sent back the actual essay file as well, with a bunch of comments, sometimes at the end, sometimes in square brackets in the middle, or certain things are highlighted. So there tends to be a lot of stuff sort of throughout the essay. So make sure you read that carefully so that you're able to respond to those questions, or particularly if there's comments that I've made or corrections I've made that you're not quite sure about, that you can follow up and be in touch with me and ask about. Unit 8, as you may have seen already, then we also have a little bit longer to work on. So the due date is next Thursday. I'm just going to double check the actual date of that here. So Thursday, Feb 17th is what we're looking at for essay number 2, or Unit 8, which is essay number 2, which is really just a revision of the first essay. So again, you really want to be careful about going into the file that I send back to you to get as much of the feedback as possible. And again, it's not always highlighted, or it's not always really obvious, so you do want to read through fairly carefully. And many of you will probably use that same file, the essay 1 file, as your basis for revising for essay 2. And of course, you want to make sure you've deleted all those extra comments or little square bracket stuff, or any of the questions that I've asked if you're working with that same basic document. So just be sure to be careful with that for a number of different reasons. So Unit 8 has you primarily building in a secondary source to your essay. So obviously using the article databases that we've looked at, finding a discussion that's particularly about the short story that you've worked with, not just a related idea somehow, and then integrating that effectively throughout your essay. So really each body paragraph will have not just quotation from the primary source or the short story, which it already does, hopefully, but also quotation from your secondary source. And again, you really want to be thinking about that sort of shape of a paragraph that we've looked at in terms of laying out an idea, an example to support that idea, or multiple quotations from the primary text, and then secondarily, well within the body of that paragraph, support from a secondary source that literally supports an idea that you've already presented in your own words. So you never want to begin a body paragraph with direct quotation from a primary text, or certainly from a secondary source, because you always want your voice to be presenting that idea at that point in the essay. So again, for Unit 8, even though it's relatively straightforward as far as working with a document that you already have fairly well developed, it's not just an exercise in editing, so just making little changes here or there, and it's not about just correcting the things that I've pointed out in the document that I send back. So you really do want to think about revision as a re-seeing of essay number 1, and of course you're integrating that secondary source, so that's a kind of fundamental change that you're making as well. Note too that your works cited is going to change. You'll have not just the 1 entry for the short story, but at least 2, the short story, and now the entry for the database article that you'll be finding. So you need to pay attention to that formatting as well, as far as getting the entries correct, but also arranging them and formatting the page correctly as well. So if there was one thing that kind of emerged in a lot of essays for this past assignment, Unit 7, that I would really want people to pay a lot of attention to, is kind of overall organization around a thesis that works, but then making sure that each body paragraph begins with a topic sentence that, again, is an idea or sort of your interpretation that's clearly related to the overall theme, and that presents an idea that you then support with details from the text, and then support with secondary source quotations. So a lot of people fell into the trap, which is easy to do, of almost just going through the story page by page, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then at the end. So you can kind of catch yourself if you're going through chronologically, and if you were to read all of your quotations from the story? Is it literally like, this is the first page of the story, and then your next body paragraph, oh, I can flip the page of the story, and here's your next quotation, and I flip through, and I flip through. So it's almost like your essay follows the same chronology of flipping the short stories, or the pages of the short story. Often that means you've fallen into just kind of summarizing, here's what happens next, here's what happens next, here's what happens next. Whereas if you're organizing around ideas, like say you did gender roles in boys and girls, for example, you might talk about sort of like the female gender role as an idea that shapes a paragraph, where you could actually draw quotations from throughout the story, and then your next body paragraph might be more masculine gender roles, and so you could draw again from throughout the story. So it's not like you would be just flipping the pages of the story and then end of story, end of essay. You're actually drawing from throughout. That's a good way of kind of testing to see if you stayed away from straight summary versus organizing around ideas or more obvious sort of topic sentences. This wasn't an issue for everybody by any means, but it did show up for a number of people. So if you're one of those, be sure that in your revision for Unit 8 here, you really are kind of paying attention to that. There's nothing else off the top of my head that is of really immediate concern, but I wanted to get those essays marked and back into your hands so you can begin really thinking about revision, and think about revision as re-seeing, not just, okay, I'll fix whatever Professor Snart pointed out, and then hopefully that'll be all I need to do. In some cases, for some people, it really is going to be kind of working from the ground up again to develop a thesis that works and to develop some organization within the body of the essay, and working with tone sometimes and stuff like that. And like I said, I'm more than happy to continue working with you or provide additional feedback or clarify feedback that I've already provided and that kind of thing. I guess the other thing to be careful of is that if you have a certain, like a formatting error, let's say, for your MLA citation, I may have marked it in a couple of places, but if it's throughout your essay, I didn't necessarily mark every single instance. So that's again where you want to be careful to find the instances that I did mark, kind of understand where you made the mistake so you can correct them, and then of course correct it throughout, not just in the couple of places that I might have marked. So paying really close attention to that document that I've sent back to you is of course really the place to start for revising the first essay. And I did say that a lot of people will probably work from the same document as a basic place to start, but there's something to be said for taking that document and then kind of reimagining from the ground up and starting a new document where you're actually retyping all of that material. Some of it might be the same, but in a lot of cases, if you're reconfiguring the thesis or really working with tone or reimagining kind of the overall organization, it can seem like labor intensive, but it might actually be a good investment of your time to begin a whole new document as your essay number 2 for Unit 8. But you can make that decision on your own. So I will keep in touch as we go through the week here, and you're working on Unit 8. And of course, if you have questions or anything, be in touch with me.